this day and age, everybody is now talking about innovating the classrooms, innovating the schools. But the very basic thought that people have is that when you want to change a school, you change a building. You change the classroom furniture, you put in a swimming pool, you put in digital classrooms, you put in a digital board. But very little thought goes into how to use that technology. If you would ask me, everything boils down at the end of the day with a very effective pedagogy. What do you do with your technology? How do you take your iPad? How do you take your smart class? How do you take your digital board and turn that into something that becomes a pool of knowledge? So for example, just to give you a brief anecdote of what I did as a part of my PhD, it was just a very, very simple experiment. We went to the slums of north of England. Believe me, they do exist. And just took up computers, really big screens with super fast internet connections. And every week we used to go into these centers and give children one TED Talk, the Technology, Design, Entertainment, the TED. And we used to say that once you've seen the TED Talk, I'm sure you didn't understand anything because you are only 8-year-old, 9-year-old, and these TED Talks are by maybe Bill Clinton, by a NASA scientist. So obviously you didn't understand. So let's go onto the internet. I'll give you a keyword or two, and why don't you Google that up? And once you Google that, you get along with your friends, you come and do a small presentation. The growth that we had within 3 months, it was a statistically controlled experiment. I have the results, I can share them. The learning just skyrocketed. So when you think about digitizing education, it's the pedagogy one should concentrate on rather than putting technology is obviously an aid that goes hand in hand, but more than that is the pedagogy that one needs to think about. So that's where I would rest my views, that think about the teaching methods rather than just the infrastructure part of it. You contributed saying that there's a lot of information on the web and kids really don't know what to make out of it. I think if I were a school owner and a teacher, my biggest concern and challenge is to teach children that when you go onto the web, there's an ocean of information out there. But you and me, as a grown-up, as an adult, we very well know when you put in a keyword what exactly to look for, what sort of information is relevant to you. Nothing makes me think that when you give that tool to a child which is 8-year-old, 7-year-old, 9-year-old, they cannot develop that skill. I have seen that happen, that when kids go onto Google, they precisely know what to look for after a session or two. And what gradually starts happening is that once they have so much information, once they have good reading skills, they start forming their own theories. They start critically appraising what's out there on the web rather than just accepting it. And that's what eventually gets boiled down to knowledge. And this is how you design a good pedagogy, that you need to teach your students a good critical thinking rather than just accepting all the information that is out there on the web. So that's the important bit I would like to add. The other thing is that you really don't need to build something too radical to call it a future school. All you need to do is just transform your classroom format. If you look at the centuries behind us, we are still facing the teacher. We're still having the benches. We still all point in the same direction. But why? Why do we have to do that? Now that we have the internet, teacher is not the sole source of information anymore. The technology has so much to provide that you could just have really larger scale screens and have children face those and do their thing on the internet. If you go and look up hole in the wall, you would see an ideal classroom of 21st century to what it should look like. So for an educator who's out there, a school owner, it's for you to have that design thinking to how to go forward designing that sort of 21st century classroom.